Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're going to talk about probably the second most controversial weapon that Battleship New Jersey ever carried. Now, the use of nuclear weapons is obviously the most controversial. We've done a number of videos where we talk about both Project Katy, arming Iowa-class battleships with nuclear projectiles, and the use of nuclear-tipped tomahawks during the 1980s commission. But another controversial weapon that Battleship New Jersey has a magazine space dedicated specifically to is white phosphorus ammunition for the 5-inch guns. So this is a WP or Willy magazine that can hold 216 shells for the 5-inch guns. I believe that this is the only one on the ship, and that means that they would be moving the ammunition from here by hand to the handling rooms down here off of Broadway where we are on third deck, and then passing them up to the guns and the hoists like that if this type of ammunition is called for. What is the approved application of these shells and what makes it controversial? When phosphorus hits oxygen, it ignites and creates a huge white smoke screen in the case of white phosphorus, which is very useful for screening the movement of your own troops. And that white smoke made by the igniting phosphorus is also very hot, so it can even screen your troops from IR sensors, infrared. So this makes a great tool to illuminate a target. Like we want to shoot here, we'll drop a smoke round on it that puts up a big pillar of smoke. Now everybody in the area knows what it is we want to shoot at. Or you want to obscure some position with smoke, drop this in front of it or between yourself and the enemy. Great. That is why this weapon is not outlawed in war and why it's used by most militaries around the world. However, an incendiary like this that can also have chemical weapons properties does have other more lethal, more direct uses. So just because it's designed to illuminate targets and create smoke screens doesn't mean you can't fire directly at targets with this. So, for example, during the European campaign, U.S. Army mortar teams carried about 20% white phosphorus ammunition. American tanks, American battleships, you name it, artillery pieces tended to have white phosphorus ammunition along with them. And again, it's mainly for that illumination purpose, but let's say you're in a tank that's outmatched by German tanks, you fire the WP round at them, and the tank's air system now gets a bunch of smoke in it. That tank crew might think that their tank is on fire and abandon the vehicle. Or it might obscure their optical rangefinders so they can't drive, maneuver, or fire their guns or aim their guns effectively anymore, which would give the inferior tank time to close with the superior tank and get into a position where they might be able to win that engagement. And so that's a direct fire possibility. These shells are also very, very painful if you get the burning phosphorus on yourself. They cause chemical burns, and phosphorus is toxic to humans. It can damage multiple organs if it's absorbed through the skin in the process of burning you. So it is a very painful and possibly deadly chemical weapon if used directly against populations. So in the 1980s, there was a convention which, in addition to putting restrictions on the use of landmines, certain types of lasers, and booby traps, it also puts bans on white phosphorus. Now, there are different conventions like this one that ban certain chemical weapons and things like that, but this one is specifically on conventional weapons, and it specifically prohibits the use of these weapons indiscriminately or in ways that would be injurious to the person, needlessly injurious. So, for example, a landmine is an indiscriminate weapon. You put a bunch of landmines around a town, it's likely that civilians are going to accidentally step on one and injure themselves. They're not combatants. They're not supposed to be injured in war if absolutely avoidable. So that's one thing. Needlessly injurious. Booby traps are not necessarily designed to kill somebody. They're designed to maim somebody. And oftentimes this will create a killing zone where more people come to help the maimed person, and then they are then themselves subject to attack. A bullet is a direct attack weapon. It might kill somebody, it might injure somebody, but it is designed to kill. Booby traps are not designed to kill, they're just designed to cripple. So that is needless in war. The point of war is to kill the other guy first, according to Patton, not to injure him or do any of this other stuff that we often see in asymmetric warfare. White phosphorus is both indiscriminate, it creates a big incendiary effect, and needlessly injurious. It's not a direct impact like the explosion of a regular bomb. It is going to cause burns or smoke inhalation or things like that. So under certain circumstances, white phosphorus is supposed to be banned. That said, and why it's controversial, because you have this type of ammunition, soldiers tend to use it. So in the recent war on terror engagements in Iraq and Afghanistan, there are still disputed but documented incidences of American troops using white phosphorus in civilian population centers or against concentrations of troops. If enemy combatants are inside of a structure that you can't get with conventional munitions, the allegation is that they would drop white phosphorus on them to create fires and basically smoke them out so they could then kill them with conventional munitions. Also, because these insurgents tend to be in population centers, using this means that we're using it in areas where civilians can be hurt. And there have been instances of civilians being taken to the hospital with definite phosphorus wounds, both in American conflicts against terrorism and other recent conflicts. So, we have no evidence that Battleship New Jersey ever used her white phosphorus rounds in any method besides smoke. However, it's certainly possible that during Vietnam or the 1980s, or even potentially earlier than that, WP rounds do exist in World War II in Korea, that these were used in a way that it has since been banned by the 1980s Convention on Conventional Weapons. So we will definitely be looking more into the use of these munitions on the battleship. So this is a space you can see on the tour out of the ship. We're down off of Broadway on the port side, pretty far forward at frame 96. Interestingly, this space does not have a modern bullseye in it. Oh, it does. 396-2M if you're looking at your booklet of general plans. It also has the original World War II designation B310M. So whichever copy of booklet of general plans you have, you should be able to find it on there. It's a relatively small space. It goes from frame 96 to frame 98 and a half. So that would mean that it is about 10 feet deep and a similar width. We're right next to the powder magazine for the forward 2 port side 5-inch guns. So it's relatively easy to take the ammunition out of here, carry it over there, and send it up to those guns. If you're trying to go to other magazines, you might have to carry it down Broadway some distance. Like I said earlier, there are racks for 216 projectiles in here. Be less than 10% of the total 5-inch projectile stowage on board. So these aren't used in naval combat, so they're a much smaller percent than the Army deployed with during World War II. An interesting feature of the space is, if you look here by the door, the hinge for the locking mechanism has been cut, most likely by the museum. And if you look at the door here, you can see, yeah, sure enough, here's the lock cover. All the magazines have these boxes over them, so you can only access the padlock from the underside here, which means you can't put bolt cutters on the padlock. So somebody at the museum, long before my time, just came through and cut that off. Why was this magazine space locked? There are a couple of locked magazines that were on the ship when it was delivered. A lot of the deck and weapons equipment was stowed in these spaces, like it was taken from lockers around the ship and put into these magazines and locked up. Interestingly, there is a watch clock station key box in here as well, which would seem to imply that while the ship was in mothballs, the guy walking the ship during whatever time frame he had to do those would have to come in here, unlock the magazine, visually inspect the space, and then use the watch clock key to prove that he had been in this space before securing the door and heading out. Otherwise, we've got features that are pretty common to magazine spaces: a chilled water radiator space in the overhead. These shells are not just stacked up on the ground like our other 5-inch projectiles. They are mounted in actual racks here. So that is interesting. It is a cumbersome storage technique compared to the other methods we use. So again, this is one of well over 200 spaces you'll get to see when you come out and visit the battleship. Be sure to stick your head in here and see. And it is just interesting that the battleship has this connection to a pretty commonly discussed weapon that shows up in the news a lot in relation to alleged abuses and violations of treaties and conventions and things like that. So, what are some other controversial weapons types that an American battleship might have been equipped with? Let us know in the comment section down below, and potentially we'll do videos on other types of weapons like this that the battleship might have had. Interestingly, the Hague Convention that predated the Geneva Convention going into World War I prevented shrapnel shells greater than 1 pound. So you don't see 40-millimeter guns like the Bofors of Battleship New Jersey in World War II because they are 2-pound shrapnel-causing projectiles. So because of their indiscriminate explosive effects, projectiles like that, and therefore anti-aircraft armaments of World War I, were limited in size. And that convention goes away by the time you get into World War II, because we're armed with guns like that were once considered to be violations. Other things that were violations during World War I? Serrated knives and shotguns. The Germans absolutely hated that the American Army deployed to the trenches with pump-action shotguns. So what are some other weapons like that? Battleship New Jersey certainly carried shotguns throughout her whole career. Let us know in the comments section down below. We'll talk about them more in future videos. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to support the museum and our channel. We really appreciate it. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about us. Thanks for watching.